Hey guys, cool. Welcome back. Now we're at lecture 8.3, and I'm just going to go to it right now. There we go. Sensory memory. We're going to start talking about the various memory systems that our brain, our mind uses to kind of support daily life for us. And you're going to see that they all have different roles to play. And some of these memory systems you might never even have really thought of having before, especially the ones we're going to talk about in this lecture. This lecture is going to focus, as it suggests here, on something called sensory memory. A memory system, or actually multiple memory systems, that are really tied to the sensory input that we're receiving. Okay, so we'll get there. Let's start here. This is what's called Atkinson and Shiffrin's model of memory. Don't try to say that 5 times fast. By the word modal, what that means is this is the model of memory that most people think it provides the most accurate description of the data that we have. And according to that, again, there's not a single memory system, but in fact, a bunch of memory systems. When we get input from the world, the notion is the very first memory system, and again, the one we'll talk about today, is sensory memory. It's going to kind of allow that input to exist even after it doesn't exist in reality. It's going to allow a trace of reality to kind of be there for us to sample if we need it. Again, we'll talk in detail about that. But then once things go through sensory memory, they get to what we call short-term memory. This is sort of our conscious mind. This is sort of, when we're experiencing something and we're thinking about it and we're kind of re-envisioning it or relating it to something, that's what's happening in our mind. And then when we have this experience, we sometimes then store a trace of that experience in such a way that we can retrieve it later. Back into our sort of conscious mind. And so this long-term store of information we call long-term memory. And so, I could ask you, for example, what is the name of the external agency that we're doing our work integrated learning project with? You weren't thinking of that name just a moment ago, but at some point you had been thinking about it and you'd stored it in your long-term memory. And now you can pull it out and you can say, swab the world. And that's into your mind now. Okay, so long-term memory helps us keep information for a while. And this is what we almost think of as when we talk about memory. These two will be kind of different for you. They won't fit your normal thoughts of what we meant when we use the word memory. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to focus on sensory memory for this lecture, one of the early and we think most simple memory systems, but a very cool one as well. So let's jump in. This is the interesting sort of notion. We sometimes feel like we have a sense of reality, like all of reality that's around us. But in fact, we are only attending to one very specific part of the world at a given time. And even that part, we're sometimes attending just to its visual characteristics and not its auditory ones, or just to its auditory and not so much visual, etc. So really, at any given time, we are only perceiving a small part of what's out there. But we feel like we're kind of in touch with it all. How does that work? Well, here's part of the answer. There's this idea that every stimulus that hits us, whether we're attending to it or not, it leaves a trace, what we're going to call a sensory trace, in some form of sensory store or sensory memory. So just to try to make this a little clear, we're going to focus first on the visual form of sensory memory, but there's different forms. There's an auditory form, there's a tactile form, but we're going to focus on the visual form. I feel like I'm almost about to sneeze, and I don't really want to sneeze on camera. I've never done that before, I don't think. It's funny, this holding back a sneeze. Okay. Oof. All right, so sensory memory, yes. And so visual sensory memory, or something we're going to call iconic memory. And it was first studied by a guy named Sperling. And it's kind of one of these interesting examples of a clever way of studying something that's difficult to see or measure. I don't know if I can live up to showing you all of that, but I hope so. So here's where we're gonna start. So I think on the next slide I say, yeah, do your spinning light thing. Okay, my spinning light thing. I will do that. And so to do that, I'm gonna shut my curtains and turn out this light here. Okay, so it should be pretty dark. You can probably see me because of the light of the screen. But what I'm going to do is I'm now going to put my light on my phone. And right now my phone is facing the floor, so the light's facing the floor, so you can't see it. But I'm going to step back and I'm going to move my phone around. I'll try to move it, and I say spinning light thing, so I'll try to move it in a circle. I want you, I don't know how well this will work. We'll find out. I know how it works in real life. I don't know how it works in virtual life, but let's find out. So, okay, here I go. I'm going to step back. Okay, I'll do that again now that you know the silliness that I'm doing. But here's what I want you to pay attention to. Of course, there's only one light, right? There's a camera here and it's got one light. So at any given point in time, there's just one point in light. But is there ever a point where you're seeing a line of light? In fact, if I do it well enough, can you see a full circle of light? You can certainly see that when I do this live. Again, I don't know how it comes across this way. But see, do you see like a comet at least, a light with a line behind it going around a circle? And if I do it fast enough, does that actually come back on itself and become a circle? Let's try. I know I'm going to end up like throwing my phone out the window or something really stupid. So it's not there. All right. Cool. My neighbors think I'm nuts. Okay, so so what's that spinning light thing? What's that all about? Well, I mean, it's just a clear demonstration that although there's only a point of light there, when we do it real fast, and you know this with sparklers and things like that, you can see a trail of that light. What is that trail? Well, that trail is the sensory trace. It's a memory system that's remembering where that light was just a second ago, and just a bit before that, and just a bit before that. And that's the tail. Okay, and it turns out you can try it with a clever enough experiment. You can try to get at how long those memory traces last. Let's jump to YouTube. Now, I'm worried whether you'll get the sound. I hope you will. Okay, you don't even need to have the sound. Okay, so I will walk you through this, and you will get the instructions here. George Sperling came up with this experiment to try to measure, first of all, to show that this form of memory existed. So that is, he would start by doing what you're going to do here. Okay, you're going to see a very brief flash of letters, and what I want you to do is just, it'll just flash really quickly, and I want you to kind of do two things. The first thing is, when it flashes, try to be aware of how many of the items you think you saw, even if you just saw them for a second, because what should happen is you feel like you see a bunch, but then they fade away really quick, almost like a dream. So as you're trying to capture them in your mind, you're trying to, consciously capture what your mind saw. So let's just play this for a moment. So yeah, you're going to see about 9 of these letters in a 3x3. Each trial begins with a plus sign. So you look at the plus sign. And as you're looking at the plus sign, there will be this 3x3 flash of letters. So again, they're going to flash, and there'll be a pause. That's when you write down how many. Yeah, and here we go. Let's do a few practice trials. Please prepare for your first practice trial. Stare at that point. Flash of letters. There it was. Write down as many as you can. Okay, that was the first one, and it's quick. Let me just pause here for a second, give us a chance to breathe. That was really quick, which is good because now you have a sense, right? That first one, you just want a sense of how quick it is. But again, what's that sensory experience that you're experiencing? Does it feel like for a second you can see them all, but then they kind of go away? That's the kind of thing that a lot of people report. So let's try this again. Let's let it continue. These are the letters that were there. Okay? So if this was an actual trial, you'd write down the number of letters that you correctly reported. I think there might be one more practice trial. Oh, sorry. Okay, I guess, a few more practice trials, right. Yeah. It's kind of slow. Here we go. Ready? WQLI, there's a Z there, something like that. So we would write those down if we were. WQLI, Z, those are the ones, so I would have got 5 of those. 9. Do another one. I saw an O-N-E, I saw a Y, I saw an R. I think there might have been a K. O-N, no, not an E, Y and an R, and no K. So I got some things wrong too. Okay, pausing for a moment. All right. I'm going to, suggest that you try this in detail online. I'm not going to do the details online, just because it takes a while. This is like a 10-minute video. I'm not going to do the whole 10 minutes with you. But here's the punchline of the first part, and then I'm going to introduce you to the second part, which is going to bend your head. But the first part is when people are asked to do what you just saw, they usually can get about 4 or 5, which is about what I was getting, 4 or 5 out of the 9. And so when you try this with the actual trials, I'm not going to do those for you. I'll let you take a look at those. But see, you'll probably get about 4 or 5 out of the 9, okay? But they always say like, but for a second it felt like I could see them all. But when I started reporting them, it's like they were fading away and I couldn't keep I couldn't remember them. And so this is what Sterling would hear. And he came up with a different approach here, or he came up with an interesting twist. Okay, here we go. So phase 2, the second part, will be a partial report condition. So I'm just going to let you experience that first, and then I'll give you the logic. That'll kind of mess your head up a little bit, all right? So it's going to be a lot like before. There's going to be a fixation cross. There's going to be a flash of letters, but then there's going to be a signal indicating which row of letters to report. So instead of being asked to report all of 9, if you can, we'll either be asked to report the first row, the second row, or the third row. Just that row, okay? So let's just walk through this and you'll get the sense. And then I'll try a few trials along with you. Oh, it's a tone. I'm not sure you can hear the tones. I'm not sure I can hear the tones, to be honest, because I haven't heard a thing. But a high is the top, mediums. Shoot. Dang. Okay, so we can't hear the tones. Well, this is going to kind of mess things up for me. But hopefully I can give you the sense. I will do it. I will be the tone. High tone sounds like this. Beep. Medium tone sounds like this. Beep. Beep. So you'll see a 3x3. You only do the tone that goes with either the middle, top, middle, or bottom. You ready? Yes, let's try one. Beep. Oh, good. I got it right too. Okay. So it's also got visual cues, which is great. So just do the visual cues, which I think was MCS. It's what I'm going to say here. And so we don't need my stupid tone anymore. We can just use the visual cue. MCS, look at that. I got all three. Okay, so now you get the idea. Let's try the next one together. Sure, let's do that. Oh, not good. L-A. Oh, I'm going to say O-L-A, but I don't think. Q-L-A, O-L-A. Something like that. L-W. So I got one. I got one that time. I got three the last time, but I only got one of those. Okay. Let's try another one. R-F-B. Woohoo! Okay. Excellent. So now the part to kind of mess your head. What Sperling found is when he asked people to do this one, kind of like me, they would do pretty good. They would get about 3 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 almost every time. I had a 1 out of 3 there. Sorry. But they would be like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3. Now, here's the critical part. You don't know which row until those things come up. And those things don't come up until after the letters are gone. And so what it feels like in your mind is, oh, I've got all 9. This tells me which one. I go in there in my mind and I read those. But the thing is, yeah, you're reading it in your mind because it's not in the world anymore. By the time those are there, it's not there in the world. And yet people were able to go and consult something and be able to get, again, 2 or 3 out of these every time. If you can get 2 or 3 from any row without knowing which row, that means you have 6 to 9 letters that are available to you all the time. So in your full report, you could only do 4 or 5. But there's at least 6 to 9 that are available, as this cued report thing suggests. Did that mess your head up? If it did, go check out some other things online about Sperling. But the important point of all this is that there's a trace, a visual trace. So when a trial proceeds, if we kind of imagine a trial as it just did. So when a trial proceeds, let's go from here, and I'll just try to get really clever with my pause here. So, okay, so there was the fixation. Oh, so then there was the letters. And then there was this. And this says, okay, go there. But there's no letters there anymore. But if you can do it, then they are sort of there. But they're here. They're somewhere, where are they? On your retina, perhaps. Somewhere very early in your visual processing stream, there is something that holds on to the input. Okay? So, and this is a case of that with visual input. Okay, so let's go back to here. And you have a sense now of this iconic memory. So let me I know it's still probably a little, let's go a little further and I'll try to tie it all together. Okay, let's move from the visual memory to the auditory one. And then I'll try to glue these both together to help you understand what they're for, really. Okay. So with the iconic memory, the idea was we seem to keep some memory of what was in our visual world just a second ago that we can go back and consult in some way, or that leaves a trace in the current reality, so to speak. It turns out that's also true with auditory stimuli, and it's probably even more useful for us for auditory stimuli. In fact, in a way, it will show us more what it's all about. So when we talk about the auditory memory version, we call it echoic memory, and like an echo, right? And the best sort of way, I think you know of this form of memory. You just may have not have thought about it too much, and you certainly probably didn't think about it as memory. But I call this the what effect. So imagine the following thing. Imagine you're sitting, you're studying, you have an exam coming up, your mind's really into it, you're working really hard to do well, and your little brother or sister comes up behind you and says something, and you might find that annoying at first because you're focused in on whatever, and so you turn up and you go, what? But as you're saying that, you can almost kind of replay what they just said. And maybe they just said, Mom wants to know if you'd like something to eat or if you'd like a snack, right? And then suddenly when you play that back, you're like, oh, sorry. Yeah, that'd be great. And sometimes we even say, what? And the person starts to repeat themselves and you say, no, actually, that's okay. And you're basically saying, oh, by now I've heard you. When I said what? I hadn't processed what you said, but whatever you said stuck around somewhere. And after I said what, I shifted my attention to that and I heard what you said. You know, we can kind of do that. Someone says something to us at the time, we don't hear it, but we can kind of get our mind back to it and then we can hear what they said. That's echoic memory. So there's a trace of that auditory stimulus. So here's an attempt. This is this game we have, an attempt to get you to kind of feel this a little bit. So I'm going to have to write down some numbers, and I'm going to use double-digit numbers just to make it a little different. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a bunch of numbers. And at some point, I'm going to just say stop. And when I say stop, what I want you to do is kind of go backwards from stop. What were the numbers I said just before stop? Can you kind of hear them in your head? Okay, so here goes. Ready? 22, 35, 17, 12, 52, 78, 49, stop. What was in your head? Was it possibly something like 12, 52, 78, 49, stop? Try this with your friends. I don't know if it's the funnest game around, but literally if you have some set of numbers and then you say stop, you can almost hear those last few still echoing in your head. And you can kind of grab them from whatever that is and say, oh yeah, I know what that is. And you can say what that is. You can read them into your working memory, as we'll talk about next lecture. Okay. Cool. Yeah, hopefully you have a sense of that. If these are at all confusing, look for demonstrations and stuff online that will probably help you kind of really get a feel for it. There are experiments, and one of the cool things to realize is that Sperling experiment that I described. With experiments like that, you can not just show that iconic memory exists, you can see how long it exists for. Remember, the letters were presented and then those little prompts, right, that said which row. Well, you can have a delay between when the letters are presented and when the prompts appear. And it turns out if you make that delay long enough, then people in the partial report are not doing any better than people in the whole report. And that happens after about a second. Okay, so it seems like the visual trace lasts for about a second. The auditory trace, the echoic memory, seems to last about 4 seconds, a lot longer. And that's why we're a little more aware of that, okay, because it lasts a little longer. Now, all of this, I just want to end with this sort of question. What does sensory memory do for us? Why do we have these systems? And again, what they really help us do is the following. We can really only attend to one thing at one time. The environment can pull our attention to certain things. It can kind of say, like, imagine we're walking, down the street, looking at our cell phone, and we step on a street, and there's a car coming fast. Well, there's part of our brain that will sense that. It'll trigger our amygdala, our fight-flee reflex probably. It'll orient our attention to that car. We'll suddenly look at that car. We'll feel the fear. We'll jump backwards. But think of that process. So we were attending to our phone when our unconscious mind saw the danger, and the amygdala triggered our mind and put us into fight or flight mode and shifted our attention over to that stimulus. Now, what does sensory memory do for us? It gives us a 1-second head start. Okay? When we shift our mind over there, we can kind of see what's been happening. Not just what is happening, but what has been happening for the last second. And that puts us in a better position to evaluate the situation and to respond. Okay? And the same sort of thing with echoic memory. If we're able to see a little bit here, a little bit of the past, when we have to shift our attention. So let's say, we're attending to something over here and someone's talking, but suddenly there's something they say that grabs our attention that seems important. The unconscious mind hears it, grabs our attention. Well, again, we can attend, but what grabbed our attention? That was in the past, right? We've already gone past that, but we would like to know. And well, we have a 4-second visual store or auditory store. So as long as we shift our attention pretty quickly, we can know what grabbed our attention. It really allows us to see into the past and have that more stable notion of what's going on. Why was my attention pulled over this? And it almost feels like, it lets us feel like we pulled our attention over that, as if we knew there was a danger. But that's the way these systems work for us. Okay, cool. I know some of this is kind of tricky to wrap your head around sometimes, but all these memory systems are really cool. We don't just live in the present. We have one foot in the past all the time, and we have one foot in the future. By the way, the brain is predicting the future at every moment as well. But these sorts of sensory memory systems help us kind of glue together past and present in a way that gives us a stable reality. That seems like an important place to stop.